but the effort that people put in to come to the minyan today, coming to minyan today, is worth much more than a regular day. Even though a regular day is worth a lot, but today, when you come and the person puts in that extra effort, um, I will say this. Just good morning, everybody. I will say a story about my father, blessed memory. When the weather wasn't good, my mother should be well said to my father, maybe you should stay. It was Shabbos, and it was Shabbat, and the weather was very bad. My mother said, maybe you should stay home and pray at home. So my father says, would I go into the store? My father had a little mom and pop shop. Would I go into the store on a regular day? If the weather was this way, I would go into the store. It wouldn't stop me from the store. So if it doesn't stop me from the store, it shouldn't stop me from going to shul. That was his, you know, there are some people that give more strength and focus to business than to mitzvahs and to davening and to learning. And he understood that you can't, you know, if that's important to you, you can't be more important to go to work than to go to shul. Okay. With that being said, we are now on. We started a piece on 42A. 42A of a notain, right? It may put, so the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, notain adam, a person is allowed to place chamin letoch hatzonein. He could put hot water into cold water on Shabbat. And the reason for that is because this opinion is saying that the cold water, even if the hot water is boiling water, but it's not going to cook up the cold water, this opinion says, because the cold, which is on the bottom, will out strengthen the top, and therefore it will not boil up the bottom water, which is cold. However, Beis Shammai says you can't put the cold water into the hot water because the hot being on the bottom, cold being on top. So the cold coming into the bottom would overpower the cold. We spoke about that, the physics last week, right? And therefore it would heat it up, and you can't do that. It would heat up, it would be cooking the water on Shabbat. Beit Hillel says that if the hot water is in a kli sheni, if the hot water is not in, it's not in the pot that it was cooked in, that it was boiled in. Rather, it's in a cup. It's in a cup, so it doesn't make a difference whether the hot water is on the bottom, hot water is on top, because kli sheni, he says a second utensil, meaning it's not the original utensil that it was cooked in. It was poured from the original utensil into a second utensil. Kli sheni will not be mavashel, will not cook the water. We said that when it's a kli sheni, when it's not in the original vessel, it's poured from the original to a second vessel, it won't cook water. But because water requires a lot to cook it. But there are certain things that we said that are called kale bishul, easy to cook, and therefore even a kli sheni, the second utensil, would cook it. And therefore we require a third utensil, a kli shlishi. That's how we explained about tea. You don't pour from the urn into a cup and then put the tea leaves into the cup, because we're concerned that the cup, even though it's a kli sheni, even though the water has been cooled down from the walls of the cup, but there's a concern that it will have the ability to cook those leaves, because the leaves might be easy to cook, and therefore we have to pour into another second cup, which will be the kli shlishi. Number one would be the kli rishon, is the one that was cooked in. Kli sheni is the second utensil that was poured into cup number one, and cup number two is kli shlishi, and then you can put in the tea bag. You said to the group, Adam? Thank you very much. You can go ahead and put whether hot into cold or cold into hot. Mutar Beit Hillel says it's permitted because it's a kli sheni. Now we turn the page. We are on now 42A2. 42A2. And he says, and Beit Hillel explains himself, Bemedvar Mamurim, What are we referring to? Beit Hillel says this is talking about because when it's a kli sheni, it's a second cup. It's not in the original cup that it was cooked in. However, over bamvati, but if it's in the amvati is the bath. If the water is in the kli rishon, if the hot water is in a kli rishon, that was the hot bath that was heated up, and if let's say they had coals underneath that heated up the water, but if it's a amvati, if you're gonna pour cold water into this amvati, this bath, then we're gonna say it depends. If the bath, so um, if the bath chamin l'toratzonein, if the water in the tub is cold, so you can pour hot water into that cold tub, because the cold tub, which is at the water, which is on the bottom, would outpower the water that's on top. But the lo tzonein l'toch chamin. But if that bath is hot, being that that's a kli rishon, that bath was the original water that was heated up. So if you pour cold water into that bath, it will heat up that bath, that cold water, and it'll be cooking. Good morning, Levi. Boker Tov. And Levi's here. Look at that. Levi made the move. So we're talking about, like we said, this bath, if it's a kli rishon, if it's the original utensil that it was cooked in, you would not be able to put cold water into that bath. Rabbi Shimon ben Asya oseh. Rabbi Shimon ben Asya forbids even putting hot water into cold water. Now, why doesn't he allow hot water into the cold water? We'll see. Is it because he's afraid that if you do hot water into cold water, you do cold water into hot water? Is that his issue? Or does he not agree with this idea that the bottom overpowers the top? Okay, we have to see more about that. But he says you cannot put hot water into cold water, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Asya. And Rav Nachman says, Halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Asya. Rav Nachman takes a position. That's his position. We'll see later on in the Gemara about this, what others will say. Rav Nachman takes a position. This is a law follows Rav Shimon ben Asya. You can't put not, meaning everybody holds you can't put cold into hot, right? Everybody holds you can't put cold into hot. Oh, if the hot is a kli rishon, if the hot is a first utensil where it was cooked in, putting cold water, hot water into cold water. Here we say he's the first opinion that has a problem, right? Shimon ben Asya is the first opinion that's concerned for that. Now, they bring down from the Chidushi Haran, why does he say you can't put hot water into cold water? Because the Ran says when you pour now, when you pour, okay, when you pour, right, they bring from the Tosaf Yishanim that the concern is if you allow to pour hot water into cold water, you might come to pour cold water into hot water, and therefore the cold water into hot water. If the hot water is a kli rishon, if the hot water is the original, it was heated up, so then you're going to be cooking the cold water. Now, we said Beis Shammai says that you can't put cold water into hot water, even if it's a second utensil, right? That was morning, everybody. That's the din of morning. That's the din of Beis Shammai. Okay. So again, we have three opinions, everybody. Let's line up the men. One, Beis Shammai says you can't put, you could put hot water into cold water. right? Because the cold water wins, but you can't put cold water into hot, even if the hot is in a clay sheni, even if it's in a second utensil. Betila says if it's in the second utensil, there's no problem anywhere you go. Second utensil won't cook. And Menashe says he forbids both cold into hot, and he forbids hot into cold. Even if it's it would seem he holds, even if it's a kli sheni. Now, comes the Gemara. Sava Rabbi Yosef Lemema. Rabbi Yosef thought to say that the seifel is the utensil that you place water to wash your hands and your feet, right? So this is the basin or whatever you call it that you put the water in to wash your hands and the feet. And he thought that utensil is ke'amvati, has the same status as a bath. Now the bath, we said the bath is a kli rishon. The bath has the status of the bath was heated up with the fire underneath the bath, so that's a kli rishon. That's the original. And we said Beit Hillel says you can't put cold water into the bath because the kli rishon, the bath water, the hot water will cook the cold water. Comes Rabbi Yosef to say same thing is with the amvati. He says that the same thing with the seifel. The seifel, you also would have the same status of the kamvati. It will have the same status, even though this basin, which you wash your hands and feet, you don't heat that up directly. That bowl that you used to wash your hands and feet, you pour from the bath water. You pour from water into that thing, right? You pour from the bath into, now that's a kli sheni. And yet, he says that is a problem. You can't put cold water into that because since you're using it for washing, you're going to make it very hot. And therefore, we are afraid that if you're going to use that, pour cold water into that hot water, you're going to go put cold water into a actual kli rishon. So if you're going to put it into the original utensil, of course, the base, you see a regular cup of water, or a cup that you put hot water into, that cup, when you're drinking it, you don't want to make it so hot because you want to drink it. And you're not going to make it so hot. And you're going to, and the walls of that cup cool down the water in that cup. Therefore, you could pour cold water to that cup. But that's a cup they're using for drinking. But a basin they're using for washing your feet and your hands and your face, you don't mind it to be hotter because you're not drinking from it. You're just washing and you use it to wash. And you like it nice and hot. People like same way people like a hot bath. They're gonna like the hot water to be very hot to wash their hands and their feet. We said you can't on Shabbat, you can't wash your whole body. We said you can't bathe on Shabbat. But you can wash your hands and feet with water that was heated up before Shabbat. You can wash your hands and feet. You can't pour hot water on Shabbat. You can't make hot water on Shabbat. You can't heat up water on Shabbat. But hot water was heated up before Shabbat, you can wash your hands and feet. Hot water was heated up before Shabbat, you put on a bath right before Shabbat. You can't jump into that hot bath on Shabbat. We said because of those people that used to heat it up before on Shabbat and say they heat up before Shabbat, right? Remember that? So, but here we're talking about the water that's in this basin that you're going to use to wash hands and feet. He thought it has the status of the bath. It has the status of the bath, and according to Beit Hillel, you can't, and according to Beit Hillel, the same, you won't be able to pour cold water into this basin of water, even though it's a kli sheni. It's not the original thing. You didn't cook in this bucket that you're washing your hands, using to wash your hands and feet. But because the bucket is so hot, we're afraid we're going to treat it, and it's not for drinking purposes. We're going to treat it like the bath, like the original thing that was heated up, like the bath itself. The bath itself, which is a first utensil, which was we say you can't put cold water into the bath because the bath is on the hot water is on the bottom. It's going to cook the cold water. So too, this basin that you're going to wash hands and feet in, if it has hot water in it, you can't put cold water in it. That's what the Gemara, even though it's a klisheni, even though it's a secondary utensil. Now, comes the Gemara. Amalei Abaye says, no. Tani Rav Chia seifel eina kabati. This basin where you put your water in that you want to wash hands and feet, and you can use it to wash hands and feet. You could put, it does not have a status of the bath itself, which would be a kli rishon, the original utensil that was heated up, and you wouldn't be able to pour cold water into this. This basin, if you take on Shabbat, if you take hot water from the bath, you pour into this basin. Last night, by the way, we took salt, big bag of salt in front of the yeshiva, and we poured it into a bucket. And then we took the bucket and we poured it. We didn't want to put the salt on the ground, a 50-pound bag of salt, and just start moving that bag, trying to throw out the thing, put out the thing from the bag, put it into a basin. And then from the basin, we put it onto the steps of the yeshiva, right? So they pour water from the bath into the basin, and then you wash your hands, and feet in the basin. So he says that a basin, being it has walls, it's a utensil, it will cool off the water, and then you could. He says not like we originally thought. You treat it like a kli rishon, like the original, and you wouldn't be able to put cold water into it. No, we treat it like a kli sheni, like a secondary utensil. You could put cold water into this basin if you want. That's what Abaye says. Tani Rav Chia taught in the Breita, seifel eina kabati. It's not like a bath, and never you can put the cold water into it. So now the Gemara shoots back. So look at that. What we originally thought, the seifel harev kabati, that the bowl, the basin that you use to wash hands and feet on Shabbat has the status of a bath, of a kli rishon, that we treated. Originally, we thought we treated strictly. We treat it even like, right, my clear and not. That we treat this basin like the original utensil, like the bath that was actually a kli rishon. And Rav Nachman said the law follows Rav Menashe. What did Rav Menashe say? You can't go either way. You can't go cold into hot or hot into cold. So if you can't go cold into hot and hot into cold, so if that's the case, so if you can't do that, so we have a question. Ella b'Shabbat rechitza b'chamin leka. How could you ever wash your hands and feet on Shabbat? Because what's going to happen on Shabbat? If you're going to treat this utensil like a kli, like a bath, and Rav Shimon Menashe said that you can't go either way, cold into hot, hot into cold. So if you can't do cold and hot into cold, so the water in the bath is always, you can't take a bath on Shabbat. So you're going to be pouring the water from the bath into a basin, and from that basin you can wash your hands and your feet. But when you pour the water from the bath into that basin, that water is going to be too hot, right? It's going to be too hot. You're going to need to cool down a little bit the heat of that water to be able to wash your body, wash your hands and feet. But you're telling me you can't cool it down. There's no way to do it. There's no way to pour into cold water. You told me you can't pour from the bath into the basin that has cold water. You said, and you can't pour you can't pour if the bath went in. If you pour from the bath into the basin, and now that's boiling hot water in the basin, you said you can't pour cold water into that either, because you're treating this basin like the original bath itself. The original bath, you definitely can't put cold water into the original bath, because the bridge bath is hot. It's on the bottom, will cook up the cold water. But Hillel says, but you could pour hot onto cold. And therefore, so according to Beit Hillel, you would say, hot into cold, you could go ahead, pour cold water into a basin, and then pour the water from the tub, from the bath onto this water. And therefore now you will have water that will be not as boiling hot, and you can wash your hands and your feet. But Reb Shimon ben Ashi said you can't even do hot onto cold. You can't even do hot onto cold, so you're stuck. So that is the Gemara's question. How would you ever have washed your hands and feet from boiling hot when the water was heated up right before Shabbat? And we know everybody was washing their hands and feet on Shabbat with hot water. Everybody had that ability to wash hands and feet. They heated the water before Shabbat, and somehow they were able to make it not as hot. They were able to figure out how to make this water that was boiling hot and some other cold water come together, and they would use that in the basin to wash hands and feet. But how do they do that? If you treat the basin like, if you say the basin being its a second utensil will not have the ability to cook, so then it's very simple. You can go ahead and put hot water into the basin, then add cold water into it. But you're saying you're treating it like the original. This opinion holds like that. Rosh Hashanah holds that it's like or the Gemara Rabbi Yosef thought that this basin has a status because you want it to be very hot. The morning Gemara using it for cooking purposes, for washing purposes, so you're going to want it very hot, and you treat it like the bath. You treat it like the bath, so then it's a clearly shown. Then it's a first utensil, and Rav Shimon ben Ashi said you go either way, cold to hot, hot to cold. So how could you ever make this water usable for washing on Shabbat? Because the water's going to be too hot, and there's no way to get it. There's no way to create something here, a middle of the road, not boiling hot water.
You can't cool it down because you put the cold water and cool it down. The cold water.
Right. You can, and he says you can't even put the hot water onto cold water.
Right. So the other option, you put a bunch of cold water
in the basin, and then put the hot water. Yeah, and he said you can't even do that. Morning, Murray. So that's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara says, Mi Savrat, Rabbi Shimon HaSeifer Koi. See, you thought that Rabbi Shimon was going on the Seifer, on the second part. The Gemara says he's going Areisha Koi. He's going on the beginning part. Different than what you thought. You thought that he's going on the Seifer, and Rashi puts in. You thought he's going on the second part that the Tanakama only permits hot into cold. The first opinion says only hot into cold. And he comes and he says that even hot into cold, right? We thought he said, like, again, the first opinion said you could put hot into cold. Sorry, again, right, the Tanakama. You thought he's going on the Tanakama. Where the Tanakama held that you only allowed to put hot into cold, right? That was Beis Shammai. You could put hot into cold, and one second, or maybe I won't call it Beis Shammai, right? But it said in the Sefer. The Sefer says that. Let's see the language over here. You think that he's going on the Sefer that Beit Hillel, right? Beit Hillel permitted putting hot into cold in the bath, and Reb Shimon says that you can't even put hot into cold. That's what you thought he's saying. That's not what he's saying. He's going Areisha. He's going on the beginning part of the Breita. What's the beginning part of the Breita? The beginning part of the Breita is we're talking about mixing water into the cup. We're not talking about the case of the bath. That's not what he's going on. He's talking about Beit Hillel, Matirin Bechamatos, right? Beit Hillel says if you're talking about the cup, right? What does Beit Hillel say about the cup? Beit Hillel says if it's a cup, the cup is a second utensil. It's a cliche need. And if it's a second utensil, you could go either way, cold into hot, hot into cold, right? Because the walls of the cup will cool it off. Rabbi Shimon Manasseh said, and Rabbi Shimon Manasseh says no. He says you cannot pour Sona L'Tochamin. Rabbi Shimon Manasseh says you can't pour. That's where he's coming to forbade. I mean, Beit Hillel says you could go either way. Hot at the cold, cold at the hot. There, Rabbi Shimon Manasseh is specifically, when he says Oser, he's specifically forbidding cold into hot into the cup. But to pour hot into cold in the bath, like the bath, if you take hot water from the bath and put it into cold water, even into the bath, right? If you have a bath that's cold and you want to put hot water into the bath, you could do that. Because the bath is cold, the cold will overpower the bottom, overpower the hot. So therefore, being that's the case, that's why we could have thought for Shabbat, how did they wash? They washed, meaning they thought that the safel, they thought that the basin is like the bath. But the bath, the only stringency that will come out as a result of that would be that we can't put cold water into the hot water in the basin, because we'll treat the hot water in the basin like the bath, and you can't put cold into the hot bath. But we're allowing putting the opposite. If you would have, let's say, cold water in the bath and you want to put hot water into the bath, you could put that. So therefore, that's how they would be able to wash. What we were thinking originally is we were thinking the way they would wash. If they want to wash with a basin on Shabbat, they would put the hot water, they would first put cold water into the basin. And then they would put hot water onto that cold water. And that cold water would overpower the hot, and it will not cook the hot water. The cold water will not be cooked through the hot water that's being poured on top of it. And that's what we, and meaning Beit Hillel will say you can't go ahead, and Beit Hillel will say you can even pour cold water into hot water into the basin. Good morning, Miss. Good to see you. Thank you. Yes, we got to show up, right? You got to be in it to win it, right? Very bad, extremely bad. Subway was fine. Yes, you know what? They gave a time last night. They said there's going to be a train at 5:58 and 6:18, and they were on the button. Someone looked it up for me.
But they're that spread out. Like it's not like
Right, that was the F train, 5:58 and 6:18.
wow.
Have a great day. So that's a beautiful answer to the Gemara saying. Therefore, they were able to do it. According to the Havamim of the Gemara, that's how they were able to do it, because they would go ahead and they would pour the cold water in first, put the hot water in.
So is there a different standard for the basin and the tub?
So he wants,
From
right,
the tub to the basin?
right, so he wants to say the basin is different than a regular, what the Gemara originally thought, that a cup that you use to drink something is different than a basin.
Which is different than the tub.
And so now the question is, if the base, now the question, what is the basin? Does the basin have a different din like the tub? Or does the basin have a din like a regular, like a separate cup? And therefore, if it has like a cup, we say a second cup will not, cliche, won't cook. If the basin is not like a cup, then it's like the bath, it would cook. So that's the question. How do you treat? But we're saying now that the bathtub, everybody agrees at this point, the bathtub is cold. If it's cold water, you could put hot water directly onto cold water. Even for hot, if you have, let's even have water from whatever you have, even have one bath, it's hot, and you want to pour into another pool of cold water, you could pour the hot into cold. And therefore, that's how they were originally going to go. But the question is, if you're gonna pour cold water into the basin, which is hot, would we treat the basin like a kli sheni and it won't cook, or do we treat the basin like a kli rishon, like the first, and it would cook? That's the question.
At what point can you start putting the cold into the pot?
Right. So on a regular cup, you could put cold into hot, since it's a cup, it's secondary. And this is the question: how do we treat a basin? Does the basin have a status like a cup, or does the basin have a status like the original? Have a great day, everybody. I can ask you to close up the shop because,
Yeah, please.
because I want to catch that train. You know, oh,
Go to the Fifth Avenue.
I'm not sure that, yeah,
Okay.
if I can catch that.
yeah, with this wire, I don't know, I don't want
Yeah.
to fall on it. Okay, I gave
I
you.
got it, I got it.
Very much.